Hello, everyone. Hope you're all having a fantastic day. Seems like Facebook's not working. Let's figure out what's going on with that. Give me just 1 second to figure this out. While I'm trying to figure this out, we're giving away $1,500 in World Series of Poker seats for the Big 50. If you want to get access to that, go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/WSOP. I believe that's it. Let's see. JLpoker.com/WSOP. No, that's not it. Sorry, wrong URL. Pokercoaching.com/WSOP. There you go. Go to pokercoaching.com/WSOP. We have Facebook up and running. Good. I'll type the URL in the main chat. Poker. Let's see. Go there and have your chance to win one of the 3 seats to the Big 50, is what it's called, I think. Hope everyone's having a great morning. I posted something on Twitter yesterday, something to the effect of, life is too short to deal with haters. As you start to develop popularity, or people follow you, or in your day-to-day life, understand that you get to choose the people who are around you. Sometimes they do their best to choose you if they're actual antagonists, but for the most part, especially on social media, just click block. Understand you don't have to deal with people who are causing you trouble for no reason, right? I think a lot of people think that blocking people is a bad thing or a unethical thing or something you don't want to do or something you're afraid to do. It's kind of like calling the clock on someone, right? If someone is making the game not fun and miserable, and, you have to understand there's a big difference between like a trolly person who is actually not malicious and a malicious troll, right? Malicious people you probably should be just getting rid of. Non-malicious people, don't worry about them. Because there is a lot of value in constructive criticism, right? But it's very important to understand that you do not have to deal with people being absurd. And you don't need to deal with that. You don't need that in your life. And if you are a hater out there, say you do spread hatred, realize that you have more potential than that. I used to not be the most positive, upbeat person in the world, and I don't know exactly where I changed, but life used to be not so great, and now it's pretty great, and I think it's because we have spread positivity. We've worked with other people. We try to spread good things in the world, and if you spread good things in the world, you'll get good things back. Splash says, your girlfriend says you need Jonathan before bed. That happens to be your name, but she was talking about my YouTube videos. Well, good. What are my views on running the board twice? Doesn't matter. Completely irrelevant. I typically do not run it twice because I know that I am not going to go on tilt if I lose. Whereas a lot of people will go on tilt if they lose, which is fantastic. At the end of the day, though, I don't think it actually matters so much, but a lot of people do care a lot. All right. Today we're going to talk about how to play small pairs. Louis Philippe sent this in. Louis Philippe is here 95% of the show, so if Louis Philippe sends in something, we're certainly going to answer it. So, first things first, there are many ways to play small pairs, right? Are you strictly trying to set mine? Oh, hi, family. Do you need my help or no? Okay. Oh, Thomas wants to say hello, I see. 1 second. We'll get to small pairs in a minute. Hi. How are you? Are you having fun? He doesn't want to look at me. He wants to look at all the cameras. What are my thoughts on using a rock and a cash game? I don't know. All that stuff is kind of beyond the scope of this. The number of people who are using a rock and a cash game is incredibly small.
What's a rock and a cash game?
What is a rock and a cash game? A rock and a cash game is where the winner of the hand has to put in some amount of money blind, usually 2 big blinds.
You mean on the next hand?
On the next hand. So it's kind of like a straddle. And then the action usually goes around that person pre-flop. So like say you won the hand and you're going to be in the cutoff next hand, right? So now under the gun will go, second position will go, third position will go. It'll get around to the hijack seat. He'll go. It'll skip you in the cutoff. Then the button goes, small blind goes, big blind goes, and then you go. Usually. They change it up. Sometimes that person just goes in order. Basically, it just doubles the size of the game and makes a weird straddle in there. It's like, sure, whatever. Something people do to make their game special, in my opinion.
What do you think of straddles?
Straddles are terrible. You definitely don't want to be the one making the under the gun straddle. You're just going to lose a ton of money doing that. And button straddling does have its place. It's really bad for the game because it screws the blinds completely. Usually on a button straddle game, the small blind goes first. So they already had the worst position. Now they have the worst position on every betting round. And it's miserably bad for the game. I try to not play games where the button can straddle. If the button can straddle, though, and you're deep stacked, it's great. A good way to beat those games, though, is to play shallow stacked. Because then, everyone else is playing a deep stack strategy. You're playing a shallow stack game. You'll play a different hand distribution than them, and you will win all of the money. What can I do for you? What can I do for you? Today we're going to talk about small pairs, though. So you have a few options with small pairs. Louis Philippe specifically wanted to know about set mining with small pairs. And, well, that's not the only way to play them, but the most obvious spots to set mine is when someone raises and you get to call, right? As long as you are getting roughly 10 to 1 implied odds or better, calling is pretty nice with pocket 10s and lower, give or take. This is all going to be very generic advice, by the way. This is not going to be advice for every single specific spot, but like say middle position raises, you're in the cutoff with pocket 6s, it's fine to just call. Assuming you're playing 35 big blinds or deeper and the raise was to 3.5 big blinds or less. Now, if you're going to get squeezed a lot, if somebody attack's going to be re-raising a lot, then, Thomas found something more interesting. He found his mommy over here. If they find something more, they're distracting me. I'm sorry. It's hard to get a thought together. If you're going to get squeezed a lot, you don't want to be flatting because that's going to result in you bleeding off that 3.5 big blinds a decent chunk of the time, which is quite bad. So 35 big blinds or deeper, it's usually fine to call raises, and that's okay. How do you calculate implied odds? You take the raise size, so let's say your opponent makes it 3 big blinds, multiply that by roughly 10, that's going to be 30, okay? So if you have more than 30 big blinds, it's usually okay to call. That's the lowest limit, though. You'll see people all the time. There'll be a raise to 5 big blinds, and they'll call off a 30 big blind stack. 5 times 10 is 50, but you only have 30, so you're making a huge mistake by calling. If you're not getting the correct price to set mine, often it's right to go all in or fold. Okay? That's usually what you need to be doing. So, say you do have 30 big blinds, someone raises to 4 big blinds from the cutoff, and you're on the button with pocket 7s, you need to be going all in or folding, not flat calling. Thomas is so happy. So, getting the correct implied odds is very important. If you're not getting the correct implied odds, you need to be jamming or folding. Is there merit to calling a 3-bet with small pairs? Well, we're about to get there. Be patient. You should typically open raise all the hands you plan on playing in most games. Some people like to limp with their small pairs, open limp. Again, there's a difference between open limping and limping behind, right? Limping behind is great. If there are 3 limpers and you have pocket 7s, just limp behind. Don't raise. Because when you raise, what's going to happen is everyone's going to call. Then you're going to flop nothing the majority of the time. You'd much rather limp behind and see a cheap flop and try to get a set. If you're first to act, though, then you should be raising. So don't do open limping. The only time you can even perhaps justify open limping is in a very, very weak passive game and from early position. From late position, there's this value in raising and picking up the pot, or raising and getting a caller and then picking up the pot. Is that right? What do you want? That said, with small pairs from early position, usually 6s and lower, it's fine to just open fold if your opponents play well. Meaning they're going to be 3-betting some, they're going to play well after the flop, etc., etc. Oh, now you're tired? Now you're tired? He just woke up from a nap. I guess he's tired again. So, with the small pairs, you should just open fold from early position. But if, say, under the gun limps, Mr. Thomas, if under the gun limps, then you can certainly limp behind with pocket 3s, because unless you expect to get raised a lot, it's going to be pretty fine. Now, let's say you are playing 100 big blinds deep. Bye. Love you. Say you are playing 100 big blinds deep. See you. And someone limps early position, you limp behind, a few other people limp, and then someone raises to 8 big blinds on the button, and you have pocket threes. Say the initial limper calls or folds, you should be calling pretty much every time because now you're putting in 7 more to try to win potentially 100, right? 7 times 10 is 70, and you can get 100. So in that scenario, you should very often be limping in, then calling. Do you think it's cool to call with 2s through 5s in a cash game out of position if you're getting good implied odds? Yes. You're saying a lot of people fold there. So it depends a lot on how bad your opponents are, Jesse. In these scenarios, as your opponents play better, you need to fold out the small pairs more and more often just because they flop so poorly. And when you get a set, there's certainly no guarantee you're going to get paid, right? Really, there are it's almost like two different ways to play the pairs because you need to play them somewhat differently in tough games compared to very soft games. Like in live cash games, 5, 10, and lower, you need to be seeing the flop with small pairs. If you can, pretty much every time. Because when you flop a set, you're just going to get paid. Or, it's often very clear when you can pick up the pot. Like, for example, say someone raises, someone calls, you call on the button with 2s, and flop comes, and they all check to you. Just make a third pot bet and pick up the pot, and you win. It's easy, right? So that's certainly something you should be considering. But yes, if you are the first to enter the pot with the pairs, you want to be raising. All right, next, when you call a 3-bet. So say we raise with our pocket 6s, and then someone 3-bets us. If we're in position, we can call way more often, right? Just because being in position gives you way more playability. And also you want to make sure you're still getting the right implied odds, which you may not be, right? Like say you raise to 3.5 big blinds in a cash game, and then the player in the small blind makes it 17 big blinds because they blast it, which is not really such a bad strategy. Say they do blast it. Now you have to put in, 13.5 big blinds? If you're only 100 big blinds deep, well, 13.5 times 10 is 135, right? 100 is less than 135, so you should fold. But say you make it 2 big blinds and they make it 4, 2 big blinds and they make it 6 or 7, now you have to put in 4 or 5 to try to win 100, which is one of the main reasons why you really don't want to be using big raise sizes, because typically big raise sizes will end up pricing you out with 100 big blind stacks. So you have to be very cautious with that. So yeah, that 10 to 1 number is pretty important. You're going to get a set on the flop about 1 in 8 times, so you want to make sure you get paid more than that amount for sure. And also the hands are really just difficult to play when they miss. So if you all have any specific questions about the small pairs, let me know. You never see small pairs turned into bluffs, probably because they have no equity. Yeah, small pairs very often are not turned into bluffs unless they have a blocker. There are certainly times for that. At a recent $5,000 buy-in tournament, Sean Winter, very good player, he decided to turn pocket 5s into a bluff against me. I had top pair, though. I think he check raised, flop, bet, turn, and jammed river. And I said, top pair, top kicker, and call for 200 big blinds. I think the board was something like 10, 6, 4, 3, 9, or something like that. He had pocket 5s. So it's always fun when that happens. Does your strategy depend on the opponents? Yeah, definitely, right? That's why I said if your opponents play worse in any way, either by being too aggressive or too passive, you should be more inclined to play more hands in general, just because you're going to have better playability, right? Like say you know your opponent's a weak, tight knit, you can call in position with all of them for sure, and then if they check, you just win the pot. Or if you know they're lunatics, you can now start calling down with small and medium pairs. In cash games with 200 big blinds deep, is it okay to continue versus 15 big blind 3-bets? Well, Louis Philippe, it depends on, again, how bad are the opponents, right? If you make it 3 big blinds and they make it 15, it's okay to fold. It definitely is a rough spot, especially because I think you're going to find people don't stack off for 200 big blinds nearly as often they stack off for 100 big blinds, and they shouldn't, right? So you have to be careful in those scenarios, that you don't find yourself in a situation where you are only getting 4 to 1 implied odds because your opponents don't double you up every time, right? What it amounts to is as you are putting in less money pre-flop, it's easier to get the full 10 to 1 or more that you need, right? As you're putting in a larger chunk and the potential reward is smaller, it's worse for you. So like imagine you can get 50 to 1 implied odds, and you do actually collect them sometimes. That's obviously way better than when you're capped at 12 to 1, because that's all the chips your opponents have. You all are saying you're happy that Evan Jarvis Grips joined PokerCoaching.com. We are too. We are expanding the roster. We now have myself, Matt Affleck, Alex Fitzgerald, Assassinato, and Evan Jarvis Grips. They are all now making quizzes and webinars. You can get a free trial at PokerCoaching.com. We have posted a few of those webinars so far on YouTube at youtube.com/floattheturn. You can go there and watch them. They're completely free there. Eventually, we're going to be charging for these in another section of Poker Coaching. But for now, they are all available while we're getting the website built. And we're just confirming you all like it. So I'm glad to hear that you all are enjoying the content. Also, if you want a chance to win one of 3 Big 50 seats that I am giving away, go to pokercoaching.com/WSOP. Enter the contest, and maybe you win. 3 people will be going to Vegas to try to win a bracelet on me. So I hope they do it. They might as well, all right? What's a rule of 15 as far as set mining? I don't know what these silly rules are. Maybe I need to start naming my rules to make them sound special. Maybe someone's saying they want 15 to 1 implied odds. I don't know. Is it good to fold small pairs from early positions? Yes, it is. That's what I just said, right? 5, 6s and lower can very often just be folded from early position. If you know they're only 3-betting 9s plus an ace-jack suited, is there still merit in calling the 3-bet, knowing when you flop a set you'll get the chips most of the time? Yes, Lewis, that's when you want to be set mining, because your opponents actually will pay you off, right? Is flight and hotel included? No. You get $500 to go play the event. If we included flight and hotel and food and beverage, it would cost us $5,000 for the trip if people decided to go off. So sorry, we're only giving away $1,500 total, plus D&D poker books, a year of pokercoaching.com. If you win, you should not be too sad about it. Are we going to allow people to order the poker coaching patches? Yes, let me write this down to remind my guy to do it. Justin P. Yeah, so I had to mail I had all the patches. I'm sorry, I'm not going to sit there and mail patches to everyone. It's a lot of effort, and I'm very, very busy. I have a guy in Vegas, though, who I sent the patches, mainly because a lot of the final tables are there. He can hand them out. And if you're a Poker Coaching member, we will make a form where you can request it, and we'll get it to you at some point. But be patient. Is it possible to play poker full-time without coaching or writing books and make a comfortable living? No, you definitely don't need to coach or write books. I don't know what would make you think that. It's almost certainly easier to be a professional poker player without coaching or writing books. What's the website to register? I'll type it in. pokercoaching.com/WSOP. And then you just go to pokercoaching.com to get your free trial. So if you spend your time away from actually playing poker, think about what happens, right? Whenever you're a poker player, you really only have 2 things you have to do. You have to play poker, and you have to continue getting better at poker. And that can mean many things. That can mean like getting in good shape, getting in good mental shape, etc., etc. So you don't really have a whole lot you need to do. If you start adding additional things to your life, like let's say, well, you want to write a book, right? That's going to take time away from studying or playing. Say you want to run a marathon, and that requires a bunch of training. Well, it's probably not going to help you with your poker, and I'm getting in better shape, but it's not like the best shape to be running a ton. It's going to not help you get better at poker, and it's going to take time away from the game. What if you have a family? Right? It doesn't really help you at poker. Takes time away from the game. It'll make you worse at poker. Right? All of these things are very clear because you have only a set amount of time in your life to be and to get very good at poker. Mainly to get very good. I think once you get very good, it's not so hard to stay kind of near the top. Like myself, right? There was a time where I was one of the best sit-and-go players in the world, the exact game that I studied a ton. But I have, in theory, slacked a bit, right? I started writing books and teaching all of you and having a family. I have other things going on. So now, I'm certainly not the best, but we're certainly very, very, very competitive. D. Nelson says, it's kind of like riding a bike. It is kind of like riding a bike as long as you stay on the bike a lot. So I'm still studying a lot, and I'm still helping a lot of people who play at a very high level. So it's as if we are doing a lot of playing without actually playing. How many World Series events am I playing this year? I don't know. I think 15-ish. I'm going out for the beginning of the series. Also, they have a $10,000 World Poker Tour event at Aria and the World Poker Tour Tournament of Champions. So that's first. And then a few World Series events right at the start. There's a 10K and a 5K. And then I am going back out for the 5K before the main event. Then there's just a bunch of other smaller events. Do I always play the main event? I've played it every year since I turned 21. No, I've not had good results. I think I have one cash. Not very good. It's actually funny. If you look at any individual player in the main event, very often their results are either great or not great. And if you take buckets of people, though, like, for example, me and my 5 friends, we've only had, I think, 2 deep runs in the World Series main event among, 80 entries? Does that mean we're bad? No, it just means it's hard to make a deep run. And if you look at our collective total amount of cashes, we're up like 80% ROI. But I'm down like 80% ROI, and almost everyone else is down 80% ROI. But the 2 big cashes are where you make all the money back. Do I sell action during the series? For the bigger events, but it's already sold out. Let's see. James and Thomas, make you worse players. Imagine how good will be if you didn't have them. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is you have to understand what is most important in life, right? Is your goal to be the best poker player in the world? Well, then you need to get rid of almost everything else you have going on in your life. But that's not my goal. And it's not most of your goals or almost anyone's goal. When I was 21, though, or 18 to 21, poker was the only thing I cared about. I played and or studied literally 14 hours a day, every day, no off days. And that's how I got good. And if you talk to all the other good players, that's how they all got good. All right, small pairs. What happens when you do flop a set? Well, when you do flop a set, you need to be... Well, first off, if you're the aggressor, you just need to keep betting. Don't be slow playing your sets. That is almost always a mistake. If you're not the aggressor, you need to be raising with your sets. You need to be check raising or raising when your opponent bets, assuming you do not have the range and nut disadvantage. Now, let's say under the gun raises, you call on the button. Flop comes ace, king, 2. And you have pocket 2s. If your opponent bets, you should not raise. You may say, why? I have a set. Well, because think about your range, right? And think about the opponent's range. The opponent has pocket aces, pocket kings, ace king, ace queen, ace jack. Lots of good hands, right? And you on the button should have lots of marginal hands, like ace x suited, like under pairs, like king queen suited, king jack suited. So really you have almost no nut hands. Now, if you are going to raise with pocket 2s, you should also raise with probably jack 10 suited as a bluff on ace king 2. But if you're only raising with exactly sets, which is what a lot of people do, well, now you're just super easy to play against, right? And you don't want to be super easy to play against. Lewis says, what against the lag? Well, it depends on how bad the lag is, right? Most loose aggressive players realize when they get raised on ace king 2 that you have the nuts. So, I mean, the times you want to raise in that spot is when you're against a weak passive player who, when they bet, they just have a very good hand, right? So you don't want to raise the loose aggressive players. That would be an even bigger mistake. You want to raise the very tight players who, you know, when they bet, they must have ace queen or better. That said, understand on ace king 2, if your opponent goes bet, bet, jam, 2s are not in very good shape. Sounds crazy, I know. But, I mean, they're in fine shape. You're not going to fold. But you lose to aces. You lose to kings. And you're only beating ace king. Obviously, there are more ace kings than aces and kings. But still, it's not like you're fist pump getting the money in. Why is live poker so expensive? I don't know if it is. You'd invest in your kid's future for the World Series main event buy-in, and they would appreciate it forever. I'm not sure what you mean, Julie. You mean in terms of the actual buy-in amount? If you look at most prestigious events, they do play for lots of money. That's what makes it prestigious, right? If you're playing for no money, well, then you're just playing for fun. And there are many games you can just play for fun, but very few games are played at a high level for effective fun. And most of those games aren't actually that competitive. Sure, there are some people who are very competitive at them, but they don't attract the best talents, which is an important concept, right? I mean, this is why you see a lot of very, very smart people getting into poker, because it's a way to go from having no money to a pretty good amount of money. That said, I mean, we currently have a problem in America where if you look at all of middle America, essentially, all of the smartest people, whenever they turn 18 or 21 or whatever, they leave. And then they go to New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, right? They go to the big cities and do finance jobs or lawyering jobs or whatever. And that can be correlated, or it's not necessarily correlated, but it looks a lot like games, right? You're going to find the smartest people very often getting into games where the most money is at stake. So this is why you see some esports where lots of money is at stake attracting the best game players. As opposed to games where almost they don't play for any money or almost no money. Those games often just don't have prestige. Anyway, poker's played for a lot of money. Why? Because people want to play bigger and bigger. As you can see. What's the sickest beat you ever witnessed live? I don't know. I don't worry about bad beats. I know I lost with quad kings once. It came king, king, 3, ace, ace, and limit hold'em. I lost a bunch of bets. That was fun. We ever pull a Phil Hellmuth and wear a hat that says 2 times World Poker Tour Champion and World Poker Tour Player of the Year? Yeah, if you make it for me, maybe I'll wear it one day. We'll see. All right. So yeah, set mining. When you do set mine and you make a set, you very often need to be raising. That's just going to be the right play. Unless the board is very good for you and you also lack the nut advantage. Say the board's instead Queen Jack 2 and you have pocket 2s, you should be raising there pretty much every time. Because you have Queen Jack, you also have Jacks, you have 2s, you also have stuff like King 10 suited, 10 9 suited that would like to raise as well. So there are many more bluffs that have equity, and you have more nut hands, right? So understand the difference between Ace King 2 and Queen Jack 2, or especially 9 8 2, right? On 9 8 2, you should definitely be raising. How do you recognize when someone else has flopped a set? Well, first off, are they terrible or are they good, right? If they are terrible, then very often they're only raising with sets, right? Weak tight players often only raise with sets. For example, you open under the gun and a weak tight player calls on the button. If you continuation bet Ace King 2 and they raise you, well, if you know they're only raising 2 pair and better and they don't play Ace 2 suited, they have Ace King or they have pocket 2s, or they have maybe slow played aces or kings, which they probably don't. So against very bad players, it's easy. Against loose aggressive players, it's essentially impossible unless they have very clear bet sizing tells or something like that. So you're not supposed to know when your opponent has a set. You're supposed to lose 2 sets in general. As your opponents play better and better, it's going to be more and more difficult to understand or see whenever they have a set. And that's okay. You just want to make sure that you're playing your sets and your draws in the same way. We discussed this thoroughly at pokercoaching.com because if you're easy to play against, you're just not going to win any money. So make sure you are playing your ranges in a sound manner. Shouldn't you raise on Ace King 2 to protect your sets against Broadway draws? How many outs do Broadway draws have? 4? Think about the hands your opponents would like to keep bluffing with on the turn, if they're good. Queen Jack, Queen 10, and Jack 10 suited, right? There are no other obvious bluffs. So, in that scenario, you are happy to call the flop in exchange for letting your opponent continue bluffing on the turn in the river. So no, you're not raising to try to protect your hand. The idea of protection with a hand that's the effective nuts is usually not a great idea, just because your opponents are usually drawing pretty thin, and when they don't get there, if they're decent, they're going to keep bluffing. Of course, not everyone is decent, right? Let's see. So we have pocket 5s on 7, 6, 5, all clubs. Does that change our betting strategy? I mean, if you raise pre-flop and it comes 7, 6, 5, you should probably just bet. And you should bet big. On boards that are very coordinated, you typically want to be betting and raising large. Yeah, Lewis says, fact number 542, don't fold a set. Yeah, that's right. Don't fold a set. Ugly Tuna says you want to keep the weaker hand in. Yeah, you want to keep your opponent's range as wide as possible so that they continue bluffing. So yeah. All right, so let's talk about now whenever we're shallow stacked. When you're shallow stacked, say you have 15-ish big blinds or less, if you are first stacked, you should usually be going all in or folding. I would generally not recommend using small pairs in a min-raise shove or fold strategy or a limp shove or fold strategy. It will be always part of the shoving range is what it amounts to. And so for that reason, you can just pretty much blindly follow a push-fold chart. So you can go look up the float the turn push-fold chart and go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/app to get it. Let me type this in. Completely free push-fold chart, also with a quiz feature. And that will let you know when you need to be open jamming for whatever stack size it is. It's weird to see me talk. You only listen on the podcast. I'm a weird human, apparently. What are the odds with 2s against ace-king suited? At what point? Also, it's important to understand, you don't know what hand your opponent has. Very important to understand that. If you are thinking about poker in terms of, oh, I have a straight draw and he has a pair, that's not the right way to do it. You need to be thinking in terms of hand ranges. I have my set against their whole range. How do I fare against the whole range? What's the biggest bluff I've done? I don't know. I mean, Cameron, these are things that I just don't know because it doesn't matter. I try to remember things that are very, very relevant. And like, what's the worst bad beat? Bad beats don't matter. What's the biggest bluff? Bluffs don't matter. If it's just part of the default strategy, then it's fine. I mean, I guess in theory, the biggest bluff was probably against a guy, Corey Carroll. He raised. I 3-bet Jack-8 suited. He 4-bet. Oh, no. I must have raised. He must have 3-bet. I must have gone all in. So I maybe made it like 3 big blinds or 2.5. He made it maybe not 8 or 9. I went all in for like 70 with Jack-8 suited. He called with Ace-5, and I lost. And that was a pot probably worth, I don't know, 300K? We still won the tournament. Here's the trophy. Here's this trophy. We got this by winning the Mirage. What is this called? Mirage Poker Showdown. Way back in the day. $10,000 buy-in tournament. In theory, I ran one of the biggest bluffs. You all see that? Anyway, big bluff that we lost, but still won. And they gave you a nifty little World Poker Tour bracelet too. Anyway, that was a big bluff. But yeah, he called off with Ace-5 offsuit, and it came Ace-5-5. Good read by him, apparently. The idea of good reads are kind of interesting. I was talking to someone on Twitter the other day who said, basically saying that when you're on, your bluffs work, and when you're not on, your bluffs don't work. And I generally disagree with this. I think it's a way that people look backwards and say, oh yeah, I was hot then. In reality, if you run 100 bluffs, you are going to have streaks of 5 or 10 bluffs where you just win all of them. And you have streaks of 5 or 10 bluffs where they just all fail. And you could certainly be playing your best, focusing well, and your bluffs just fail, right? In that scenario, maybe, I'm not saying this is true or not, but perhaps Corey was just making a big call. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. Poker is a glorified guessing game where you get to use math to guess a little bit better. Do you float if you miss the flop? Do you still need 10 to 1 implied odds? No. So let's say you call with pocket 5s. Under the gun raises, you call a 5. Flop comes Queen Jack 2. Your opponent bets. You should just fold. Do you need 10 to 1 implied odds? No. You need more because your odds of hitting a set on the turn are very low now, right? Instead of getting 3 cards, you only get 1. You have 2 outs, which means you're going to get there, 5% of the time on the turn? 5% is not a whole lot. So, in theory, you're just never going to be getting the right odds for the most part. And also, the problem with calling with 5s on Queen Jack 2 is you could just be against Queens or Jacks, in which case you're dead. It's combinatorics the key to thinking about hand ranges. At a very high level, I think for simplicity, it's not necessarily required. But it is relevant. Can you do home game tournament for real money? Not at the moment. I need to make a weekly home game. I do. JonathanLittlePoker.com/homegame. Although I don't play it. I used to play it every week, but it took too much time. Every week we give away roughly, I don't know how much we give away. $100-something in prizes each week. So check that out. JonathanLittlePoker.com/homegame. Although I have not played it in a while because life is hectic. Do I ever swap percentages in a tournament? Only with a few people. But so yes, with a small stack, 15 big blinds or less, you should pretty much be following a push-fold chart. Understand when you're using a push-fold chart, that implies no one has entered the pot before you. It's very, very important. If someone's entered the pot before you, that changes everything completely. So shove or fold pre-flop, make your life easy. You don't want to min raise with a hand like sixes, because if you min raise, big blind's going to call, flop's going to come, well, with bigger cards, and then your sixes are going to be very difficult to play. You'd rather just shove, pick up your equity pre-flop. That's really all the things I had to say about small pairs. Louis Philippe or anybody else, if you have any other questions about small pairs that I missed, let me know. But I think that's basically it. I mean, set mine when you're getting a good price. Open raise pre-flop. Jam with a shallow stack. That's about it. You just joined poker coaching. Are you able to get patches? Yes, as soon as we get the form up, we will let everyone know. How would you proceed with flopping a set on a monotone board multi-way? Bet. Don't necessarily raise though. So say you're the initial raiser, and a few people call, flop comes 7-6-5, like Javier said. I would just bet. You have a very strong made hand that doesn't mind protection. If you're the calling player, so say initial raiser bets, and everybody else folds to you, I think calling is fine. Raising is also fine. You have to understand though, if you call and the turn brings another of that suit, so 4 on the board now, you shouldn't fold to another bet. You should continue calling. You should maybe fold on the river, depending on how it goes. 16 big blinds under the gun with sixes, what do? We fold. Also depends on the ante, right? If there's huge ante, you can probably jam. No ante, you probably should fold. Lewis, this is all easily found in the app. jonathanlopoker.com/app. Any comments on small pairs and small blind? If your opponents are good, you often want to be 3-betting or folding almost everything from the small blind. Most people aren't good though, so you can get away with flatting. A friend and you are playing in the Colossus, and he asked you to swap. Should you? Well, Fred, if you have the same skill set, it doesn't cost you anything. If you have a worse skill set, you make money by swapping. If you are better than your opponent, you lose money by swapping. How do you call with small pairs pre-flop? Or how do you play small pairs when we call pre-flop, but we could be ahead with just our pair? Is it right to raise just to end the hand? Well, the problem with raising to end the hand is that when you don't end the hand, you're crushed. So you either play a big pot, drawing nearly dead, or you play a small pot, relatively live. This is a classic example of a spot where you do not want to be raising. Like say someone raises, you call the button with sevens, it comes 10-9-3. They bet. You shouldn't fold. You should not fold here. Your sevens are too good. Your opponent can have all sorts of overcards. And this is going to be a hand that you're going to call the flop and maybe fold the turn or fold the river. And that's okay. So it's fine to have hands like that in your range because you also have hands like top pairs that you're just never folding, right? You always want to make sure you're folding out roughly 30-ish% of your range on each betting round if your opponent's using big bet sizes. We discussed this over at pokercoaching.com thoroughly, so it's perfectly fine just to call in these spots and then fold it on a later betting round. Let's see. I have a true sign of a teacher. I get angered from incompetence. Listen, I try to not get angered from incompetence. It's important to understand that people find you, if you are a content creator, at different points in your career, right? Or in their career. So imagine they are very new to poker. They are going to ask relatively basic questions like, how does ace-king do against twos, right? The answer is, like we said, first off, get an equity calculator and solve it for yourself. But also, it doesn't matter how ace-king does against twos because you don't know what your opponent has when you're playing. But that's the answer. Hopefully people who ask these questions learn and they move forward with their life productively. Talk about trips, advantages and disadvantages. Trips meaning there are 2 of your card on the board. So say if someone raises, you have ace-2 suited, flop comes jack 2-2. It's a great spot to be in. In that scenario, if you're out of position, you want to be check min raising pretty much your entire continuing range, which is going to be a lot of hands. This is beyond the scope of this talk, but that's what the solvers will tell you to do. Check raise the sets, check raise trips, check raise top pair, check raise middle pair, check raise backdoor flush draws, check raise a lot, bet small again on the turn, and then blast the river. It's a pretty nice strategy. I mean, but it disadvantages the trips? No, you want trips. It is important to understand, though, when your hand is marginal and when it is premium, because very often trips are not actually that premium. I busted a 25K tournament, actually, where under the gun raised, small blind called, big blind called. I think I had like 10-8 or something like that. And it came 8-8-2. And I ended up getting it all in against the under the gun player, who I thought did not have ace-8 offsuit in his range for sure. And I thought he may not even have ace-8 suited, so I'm really only losing to pocket twos. And I think there was a flush draw available, so he could have the flush draws. And he had ace-8 offsuit. So I was wrong about his range, right? If his range was just 10-8 suited, 9-8 suited, 8-7 suited, 8-6 suited, which makes, those hands are all in his range. There are enough combinations of those to stack off, but if his range also contains ace-8 offsuit, it becomes very, very bad to stack off. So it's important to understand the range. Do we discuss database analysis? No. Although I know Alex Fitzgerald does a lot of that. Okay, so we've got which bluffs you should include to balance your range. When you have a tight set, or when you have a set and a tight image. Again, we discussed this thoroughly at Poker Coaching. Go to pokercoaching.com, sign up for your free trial, and go through the homework challenges. Because we go through this in depth. It takes more than 5 minutes. And we're running out of time today because Instagram caps me at an hour. But essentially, you want to be raising with your best made hands and your draws. And draws can sometimes mean overcards or backdoor flush draws or a gut shot. So there are a lot of draws available, and there are always draws available in pretty much all spots. How do you go about finding a backer? Put up good results. You should not be looking for a backer. I think you almost never need to get a backer unless the buy-ins of the games that you play start to go exponential. And that really only happens at the high stakes. The alternative is maybe you could sell at small stakes with a big markup, but then you're just decreasing variance. Because imagine you sell at 1.3 for a World Series event, right? For a 1,500 World Series event. Then I think people put in half the money and you end up getting like 60, is it 65%? I don't know. It's some amount of money, maybe 57.5%. But no, you do not need to get a backer. You need to get good at poker and learn to win. And if you have no results, it implies you either have not devoted significant time to the game or you're not that good. But he also says you turn backers down because you have enough weight on your shoulders. It's important to understand that all the backee owes the backer is to play well. That's all you owe them. You don't understand why 2s through 5s are folds from early position, but other speculative hands like ace-x suited and suited connectors are okay to play. They're all very close, right? 3-bets are still a concern, right? But with small pairs, very often you have to fold to the 3-bet, or you should fold at the 3-bet, depending on stacks. But also, small pairs get set over setted sometimes, which is a very, very rough scenario. And also, when you make the nut flush, or straight, you just know you have the nuts, right? Whereas with a set, you don't necessarily have the nuts. You're playing a cash game tonight. Just play well. I have a book, Strategies for Beating Small Stakes Poker Cash Games. Check it out. It's you can download it on Amazon. You can read it in 3 hours. Very, very short book. With your bankroll, do you keep it all liquid? No. Almost all the money is not in cash. Fortunately, in today's world, you can get all of your money out of investments relatively quickly. Don't put it in things like cryptocurrency that may be locked up for a long time. Or go to zero, right? You need to put it in very, very stable things like ETFs, like money market account, etc., etc. Wealthfront has a new checking account, or new savings account, by the way. They're a robo-advisor that I have a lot of money in. And they have a 2% savings account, which is very, very nice and easy. It's way better than the 0.002% you get from a bank. So at least there you'll break even with inflation. You often turn small pairs into a bluff when the board texture allows you, either by donking 33%, check raising, etc., etc. I think that's fine, Louis Philippe, but you have to be careful that you're not over bluffing. That said, if people are folding to you very often in your games, it's perfectly fine to do that. A friend wants you to stake $100 towards a $400 tournament for 20% of the action. Is that a good deal? Fred, how good is your opponent? What is the markup? Think about this, Fred. What's the markup? He wants you to put in $100, which is 25%, but he's only giving you 20%. What's that, 1.25 markup? Is that right? My brain's not working right now because we're early in the morning. To figure out markup, you take the total amount you would have to put in, 500 divided by the total buy-in, 400. So 5 divided by 4 is 1.2. So he wants you to pay 1.2, which is pretty bad for probably a shallow stack tournament. As a backer and a backee, if you're trying to be ethical about this, let me tell you the right way to go about this in my opinion. If I think that me as the backee, or you as the backee, whoever, is going to have a positive ROI, the backer and the backee should split that ROI. So let's say I think I'm going to have 50% ROI in a soft World Series event, okay? The fair thing to do, fair according to Jonathan Little, would be to sell it at 1.25. I think the ROI is going to be 50, so at 1.25, I keep half of it and the backer keeps half of it. As you get more and more well-known, essentially, like Phil Helmut's a great example of this, he'll sell these things at 3.0. The backers are getting hosed, but they are doing it for a sweat. And I have nothing against selling at a high markup if people want to sweat. That said, whenever I sell the action, I sell it as Jonathan Little just told you, where I estimate ROI, and I'm very, very reasonable about the ROI because I know my ROI is in events long term, and then I give the backer half of it. And whenever I'm backing someone, same story, give the backee half of it. A lot of people, though, they think they're a winner because they can't actually assess their return on investment, and then they get crushed. In general, though, most people lose the rake, okay? Don't forget, most people lose the rake. So most people should actually be willing to sell at a discount. How many people are going around selling at a discount, right? If everyone in the field was selling, the average price should be 0.9 or something like that. But no one's selling at a discount. People always lie to themselves, as the Nelson say, and most people think they're good. And they're not. So, figure out what is being presented and then make your decision accordingly. In general, though, if someone does not have very good results, either live or online, I'm just not even considering it. And if they're inexperienced at live poker and they come from online, like say they have $5 million in online winnings, but none live, not considering it. Say they have any sort of shady history that I can find by quickly searching it. Probably not dealing with it. Maybe if it was a long time ago, because people do change. But like if they just scammed someone recently or in the last 3 years, not dealing with it. I'll talk to my friends. If any of my friends have a bad story, like the person is slow to pay, the person's irresponsible, not dealing with it. Follow the people on Twitter, right? I learned this. One year I backed like 100 people for entire series at the World Series of Poker. And like 3 or 4 of them during the series, I knew they were playing a tournament at noon the next day, and they're out partying at 6 a.m. on Twitter. They're bragging about their party at 6 a.m. Clearly not a good person to be backing, right? So you should do diligence ahead of time if you really care that much. Anyway, there's lots of backing. That's could write a book on backing. It's a whole other topic. Thanks for making the audiobooks. I'm glad you enjoy them. You can get the audiobooks, 1 or 2 of them, not sure the deal on Audible, for free if you go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/free. I'll type it in now. So let's see. Fred is paying 75% for 80% of the action. So the friend's selling it at a discount? Very rarely does the friend assume that they are bad. But sometimes they will. Even then, though, Mark, another important concept. Let's say me as the player has minus 50% ROI. Is it a good deal to sell at 0.9? Well, certainly a great deal for the player, because you're going to lose half, but now you're only losing 10%, right? Think of the value. Are you ever floating the flop when we don't flop a set against a loose aggressive player? Yes, but you're not doing it because you're trying to make a set. You're doing it because you think you have a lot of equity. We discussed this already, where I said that if you do have a small pair, like say you have 7s, middle position raises, you call button, it comes 10-9-2, they're loose and aggressive. If they bet flop, you should definitely call. And that's because you have the best hand a lot, right? You have plenty of equity. And like I said, you should probably end up calling turn sometimes, folding the river. You just signed up for the free trial of poker coaching and you love the quizzes. Well, go ahead and upgrade and get access to all 400 of them or whatever we've made. 400 of them and many, many more to come. Negative ROI? Nonsense. Everyone's a winner. Just ask them, says Mark. Yeah, that's the problem. And I will tell you all, from a backer's point of view, that almost everyone who's been around for a while has won something. Remember whenever I was doing my backing, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, where I backed 100 people or so. We ended up turning a small winner. We made like 20%, so I guess that's good. But it was a hell of a lot of work. so much work. I'm not doing that again. Now I do my backing through the Pokar Backing Company. They back online players in games where they know they're going to be winners. But what I was going to say is almost everyone who's been around for a while has won something. So say you see someone who's been around for, let's say, 4 years and they have 1 win and their total cashes are like 100K, they're probably a fish. It's aggressive to say they're a fish. They're probably fine, right? But unless you are having significant success, it's hard for a backer looking out or from the outside to know if the backee is actually good at poker or just running hot. Sure, you can learn a lot by talking to people, but if you are doing backing as I try to do, where it's more like spread out tons of money to hundreds of people and just get back your 20% or whatever it is, you're not going to go through and interview every single person unless that's your whole job, and it's certainly not my whole job, which is why I like the Pokar Backing Company, because they vet all the people and they coach all the people and they make all of them good. That's not my job. I just provide consulting and advice, right? So if you're going to do it right, it's a lot of work to do it right. But if your buddy says, hey, do you want to buy a piece of this at break even, it's probably just fine. Sometimes if you're the player, you will make a deal with your friends, right? Like I'm trying to think. The World Series main events, I will probably swap with 2 different people who are definitely worse than me, but they're my mentors in life, and they help me a ton. So what's that worth, right? Don't be a stickler saying, oh, I'm better than you, so you have to give me more equity, or I'm not swapping with you, or anything like that. Understand that if someone is giving you life advice, I would just give them 5% of my main event if they wanted it, right? I mean, if I had to pay them $2,500 a year, assuming a gigantic 5% ROI, or 500% ROI, I'd pay them $2,500 a year for their advice, and they give me it for free. So don't be ridiculous. But at the same time, if you have 100 people in your life like that, well, then you have a problem. If you don't understand backing, if you have significant success, why do you need backing? Well, first, because you don't have the money. How would you not have the money? A few ways, right? First, you could spend it. A lot of poker players spend all their money on a house, on clubs, on cars, on clothes, on drugs, on alcohol, on relationships, on charity. They spend their money on all sorts of stuff. So that's where their money goes. Also, we mentioned earlier, as the buys go exponential, you may need backing. For example, I need backing for $100,000 tournaments. I don't have $10 million yet. Maybe one day. But if I'm playing 100K, you can bet I'm just going to be selling 80-ish% of the action. Good buy-in size for me is 10 to 25K. We have a very adequate bankroll for that. I'm not trying to go broke. I'm not gambling hard. So that is why someone like myself would sell action, but that's because the buy-ins are going exponential, right? Because the normal buy-in you get to play is like $3,000 on average. So if you're playing a bunch of 3Ks, but then there is a 100K that's equally soft as the 3K, you would like to play it. Are you playing sets differently in tournament versus cash games? Probably not. On wet versus dry boards? Absolutely. Right? Are you trying to get in before the river more often in tournaments? No, that's all kind of silly. I typically don't think so. Do you see any upside in playing the GTO bots for practice? They are expensive. Expensive in terms of what, Jesse? If you can find a GTO bot that plays perfectly and it charges you $1,000 and you can learn to play as good as a GTO bot, you think that's not worth $1,000? How are the dynamics in 2-2 games in Vegas? I have no clue. Loose, weak, passive. Everyone's probably not very good. So Sean gives a good example when you should not be backed. Cash games are a great example of a game where you really have no reason to be backed. Again, unless they go exponential. Like in Vegas, for example, if you look at the mixed games, the games go like 2-4, 3-6, 5-10, 10-20, 15-30, 100, 200, 400, 800, 1,000, 2,000, right? So it really gets ramped up fast towards the end. So it may make sense to get backing as you are ramping up towards the end. And that is what happens in the poker world. It gets exponential because money is very relative, right? Understand that, $1,000 to you is different than $1,000 to me, and it's different from me to a billionaire, right? It's important to understand those differences. So Anyway, there's usually no reason to get backed in cash games unless there is an abnormally huge game that is abnormally soft that you would not be able to play in yourself. What's a solid ROI in cash games? It's not really how cash games work. You need to look at your hourly rate for cash games. Any spots to slow play sets? Well, Louis Philippe, remember the Ace King 2 example. You're not really slow playing. You're playing it slowly because this is not a spot where you want to have a raising range. Top set on dry boards is a hand you can conceivably slow play. Nothing wrong with slow playing top set on, like, say raise pocket jacks and the button calls and it comes jack 5, jack 7-2, jack 6-2, something like that. In that scenario, you should do a lot of checking, but that's just because your opponent's throwing really thin. That said, you want to be betting small with almost your whole range in that spot, so you're still probably just supposed to bet small. You typically want to be slow playing when your opponent will blindly attack weakness. That's like the most obvious time. But also, if you are going to have a checking range, it is good to put some nut hands in it, especially if they're not susceptible to being outdrawn. Are you going to play the series this summer? Yes, we already talked about this. I'm going to play the beginning and the end. Before it, there's a World Poker Tour event at Aria, a 10K, and a 15K Tournament of Champions. So 2 tournaments I'll be playing. Then there's a 5K and a 10K right at the beginning. Then I'm going home. Then I'm coming back a few days before the main event. There's a 5K then. And the main event and a bunch of other stuff. Also, we're having a breakfast for everyone who's a poker coaching member. If you want to attend, that's going to be July 5th at 10 a.m. at Hash House at Go-Go, I think. Subject to change. If you're a poker coaching member, you will get an email probably in May confirming. Am I going to Fort Lauderdale? Nope, I have a baby. I'm not going anywhere until May unless something insane comes up. So no traveling for me. We have priorities. What's a good hourly rate for micro stakes? It depends on how many tables you're playing, how many hands you're playing per hour. If you're playing online, your big blind per 100 hands is the metric you want to be using. J-Dub asked the exact same question as Nick, except for he said Borgata. No, not going anywhere. I'm not traveling. What percentage of your bankroll do you recommend using for tournaments? Go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll. I'll type it in for you so you can get a link. There you go, jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll. Now you'll never have a bankroll question again. Actually, you may have a few questions. I'm thinking about expanding it and making it to sort of a bigger book, a monograph. I'm not exactly sure. But it's not too bankroll management, and it's important to understand it thoroughly. Do I recommend the Jeff Lang book? I have read it. I don't quite remember it. I will show you a good book. This is a good book. I like this book. PLO Quick Pro Manual by, says Casino Crime. PLO Quick Pro Manual. It's a big book. Solid book. That said, I think its MSRP is $300. So, expensive book. I'm actually working with D&B Poker to help get together a Pot Limit Omaha book by very, very, very popular vlogger. I'm very excited about this. It's not going to be like the most advanced book. That'll be coming in the future. But I'm really excited about that. We'll talk about that more in the future. All right, I have to go. Instagram's telling me I have no time left. Have fun. Good luck. Enjoy your day. Oh, if you want to try to win one of 3 World Series of Poker seats to the Big 50, they're $500 buy-in seats, go to pokercoaching.com/WSOP, and you can be entered to win that. You tried to get to Vegas last time, but couldn't make it. Bad beat. One of the players there actually won a World Series of Poker ring, a circuit ring, about a month ago. His name's Tom. He won it at Thunder Valley for $190-something thousand. So congrats to Tom. All right, have a great weekend. Have a good Friday. Be nice to someone. Be useful to someone. Be helpful. And add value.